Mr. Bean, Blackadder, Johnny English, all otherwise known as Rowan Atkinson, has something to say about our industry, Renault autonomous vehicles, Ford and Uber deal, EV cost parity gone out from 2025 to more looking like 2030, sustainable headlamps, 5,000 workshops, EV service data, the numbers are in. Hello, my name is Paul Callan and welcome to this week's MotorZen News. Rowan Atkinson, aka Mr. Bean, aka Blackadder, aka Johnny English. Depending on what generation you're from, you'll be familiar with some of those characters that Rowan Atkinson has played. But Rowan Atkinson is a big car fan, always has been a big car fan, and he has written an article for the Guardian newspaper in England, and he's suggesting that people should focus on holding their cars for longer, in terms of this being a good environmental aspect of how to approach vehicles and cars. And it's very interesting when you keep the idea of the aftermarket in mind, and some of the stories we have today really are surrounding the aftermarket. But what he's suggesting is that when he was young, he said that a vehicle by the time it had reached 5 years of age was basically a rust bucket, it was scrap. But what he's saying now, that if you spent around £15,000 in a car, that car could effectively last you for 30 years. And he's saying if you look at the damage that's been inflicted on the environment due to building a new vehicle, with all the materials that are used in that this is a very logical way to look at cars and keeping cars. He's also suggesting that the idea of, he uses the wording actually, fast fashion. And I've looked at that lately. I sometimes think that you only see one new Hyundai brand when actually the new model is coming out. It seems to be coming out so fast. The new models are coming so fast. And he's calling this fast fashion. And he's saying that, yeah, this tradition of changing cars every 3 years, which is predominantly, again, due to the model change, due to the leasing companies, that this is ludicrous and that we should at least keep cars for 5 years. The CO2, the amount of CO2 that's produced in the result of building a car really needs to be looked at. He doesn't see EV as being the right choice. He says lithium is absurdly heavy and uses so much rare earth materials. He says they should keep developing hydrogen. What he's saying, okay, if you're living in a city and you drive an old diesel, that may not be right for you. Maybe change to a small petrol, but certainly if you live out in rural areas, an old diesel could still be, or a relatively new diesel could still be worthwhile keeping for a long time. But I think it's going to be very difficult for something like this to get traction. But I think if the aftermarket could unite as a whole and campaign for something like this, it would be interesting, because this would produce a lot of work if we start to view vehicles differently in this way. That article can, by the way, be read on the Guardian website. Renault working on autonomous public transport. A lot of the stories we cover on the show has predominantly been in the American companies working with autonomous vehicles. Well, this is coming from Renault. They're talking about the autonomous vehicle that they're going to produce. It's going to be operating on level 4 autonomous. It's going to be a 6 meter long platform. There's going to be no driver on board. The way it's going to work is there'll be one person in a control centre. There will be over a number of autonomous vehicles. They're saying there'll be faster shuttle service, that they're going to, some of the problems people see with autonomous vehicles is that they move very slowly, so they believe that these are going to be faster, and they believe that they're going to be in full-scale operation by 2026. So again, here in these two stories, you have the two opposites. You have the idea of Rowan Atkinson saying hold a car for 30 years. You have Renault saying here's the future of which is that we all get into pods, and these pods drive us around with no driver. So interesting to juxtapose positions on that one. Ford has done a deal with Uber in America. Uber rideshare drivers are going to be able to lease Mustang Mach-E's. They can lease them from 1 to 4 months. It's going to be payment is going to come via an app. The service is going to be done by Ford dealers, and it's going to be rolling this out now in some of the big American cities. This model does exist with Hertz. Hertz do it to Uber ride-hailing drivers. They lease them at the moment Teslas. But again, it's interesting the way the car manufacturers are getting their tentacles into these segments of the industry and these segments of transport. They're really looking at all different angles of transport, and I think it's to do with the fact that the whole future of transport is changing before our eyes. We're staying with Ford, and the CEO of Ford has come out during the week, Jim Farley, and the common thinking around the EV industry was that the EVs would reach cost parity by 2025. Mr. Farley from Ford is now saying that's going to take a bit longer. He believes that's going to take to about 2030, second generation, third generation EVs before you start to see an EV come into the area of a nice internal combustion vehicle. He's suggesting that eventually everything will work together. Lower labour costs, easier to build, fewer parts, smaller batteries, less expensive materials, and one interesting line on this is distribution costs becoming cheaper due to EVs selling online, which again is going back to this agency model. So you can see how Ford is looking towards the future, that they're going to integrate this idea of selling online, selling an electric vehicle online. That's going to become a bigger part, and they're targeting that as a way of reducing the cost of the vehicle also. And again, this next story is again something that's really interesting to the aftermarket, because while in one hand we see maybe less work and less activity in service, maintenance and repair due to electric vehicle, the other side of the future is sustainability. The idea of throwing things away, the idea of things that have got slight damage on them being thrown away. This culture has to change, and here's an example of it. Tatcham Research in the UK, which looks after the insurance companies and the costings of jobs for the insurance companies, has produced a document entitled Sustainable Headlamp Repair. It's a best practice guide, and it's to encourage more sustainability. So on one hand, it's to do with getting the cost of repairing the vehicle down, to prevent the vehicle becoming a write-off as quickly by offering a bit of ways to repair the headlamp. What they're saying is 8% of the total value of a vehicle when new can be down to headlamps. It's an astonishing figure. But we do know that modern lamps are very expensive. Again, that lamp has possibly it needs to be coded to the vehicle for one thing. It can contain components to assist with ADAS, LiDAR, cameras, projectors. So there's a whole range of stuff going on in those headlamps. And what they're saying is they need to do something about this. First of all, to create sustainability, and secondly, to reduce the cost. Stop the rising cost of insurance, stop vehicles going to total loss. They're driving towards the idea of mounting brackets. They've done analysis that suggests mounting brackets are the most common reason to scrap a lamp, and lenses. Toyota are one of the first manufacturers to start offering repair lenses for headlamps, and other manufacturers, they reckon, are going to follow suit. But again, what's interesting about this, the idea that now labour time may go into fixing a headlamp, whereas traditionally it was noted on the quote for the repair that it needed a headlamp, new locking panel was put in, headlamp mounted to locking panel, very little labour around that whole thing. Well, now there's going to be labour on repairing that lamp. So I think this model of sustainability is going to become a bigger factor in cars and car maintenance and car service and repair, because sustainability is a word we're going to hear more and more about, and the very idea to just simply take something off and throw it away has to become less and less in our culture going forward. Fleet Assist is a company in the UK that works with leasing companies and rental companies to assist them with the service, maintenance and repair of their fleet. And they've done a survey of 5,000 workshops in the UK, basically looking at what's going on with EV vehicles within the fleet that's going to those 5,000 workshops. So it's probably one of the first real pieces of data that we're starting to get back now, because it's taken a number of years for EVs to get out there and for a little volume in that sector in order for us to get data from it. But if we look at what they're coming back with, they're saying that in 2022 6% of the fleet was EV, and currently it's sitting at 9% of what they service in their workshops. What they're coming back with is fewer moving parts, so therefore it's cheaper to service. The average service, maintenance and repair on an EV on this survey of 5,000 workshops of lease and rental vehicles was £171. The average for an internal combustion engine vehicle was £243. The average labour was 33% less. The average parts was 51% less. Fluids were 39% cheaper, which I would have thought would have been less. One thing they're coming back with is they're saying brakes possibly need never be changed over the life of the vehicle. I'm not sure about this, because when I look at other people servicing EVs, one of the things they're honing in on is that the brakes need more work because of the fact that they're not being used, and you're getting caliper seizing, you're getting discs corroding much more, maybe even linings coming off pads because of corrosion on them. Interesting aspect of this is they've picked up that warranty seems to be higher on EV, but it's software. It seems to be needing updates much more from the manufacturer. But if you look at this in the whole, if you look at it, a lot of this work would be to do with the dealership franchise workshops, and they've always had service and parts through thick and thin always remain strong. So they're probably less able to adjust and react to this change that's coming, whereas the independent sector possibly is. So for years and years, for generations, the franchise model has been that the parts and the workshop will always be at a certain level. Well, those parameters, those numbers are going out of kilter now, and it's going to be interesting to see how the franchise dealers, if they can, respond to this. But combine that with the fact that agency selling's coming in on the other side of it, where they're becoming less involved on the sale of the vehicle. So if anything, the future of the franchise dealer really looks very shaky, and I think, yeah, there's going to be less work, but I think more of that work's going to start to go to independent workshops. That's it for this week, guys. Thanks for watching. Again, usual, if you could like, comment, subscribe, or if there's anybody out there that you know might be interested in watching it, please encourage them to tune in and watch and subscribe. This week we're going to be at Auto Mechanic in Birmingham. We're going on the Thursday, the last day of the show, so maybe for next week's show we might have a little bit of footage about some products and offerings that we see there at that show. So that's it for this week, and see you next week. Thanks for watching. Bye.